Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The salty breeze from the Oregon coast drifted through the open window of the old wooden house in Astoria, carrying the faint hum of waves crashing against the cliffs. Inside, Emily Harper stood frozen, her fingers trembling over the dusty strings of a beat-up acoustic guitar she'd just found tucked behind a bookshelf. She hadn't meant to touch it. Honestly, she was just looking for something to do in this strange, quiet place she now called home. But the moment her fingertip brushed a string, a soft, shaky note rang out, cutting through the silence like a whisper from the past. "Put that down!" Jacob Miller's voice snapped from across the room, sharp and raw. He wheeled himself closer, his wheelchair creaking against the hardwood floor, his dark eyes glaring at her from beneath a mess of black hair. "Don't touch what's not yours." Emily flinched, pulling her hand back as if she'd been burned. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." "Just leave it." Jacob cut her off, his tone cold as the wind outside. He turned his wheelchair toward the window, staring out at the gray sea like she wasn't even there. Emily clutched the sketchbook she'd brought with her, her only lifeline in this new life she'd been forced into. She was 21, stuck in a house with a man who barely looked at her, all because of a deal her father had made. She didn't know where to begin with Jacob, or if she even wanted to. But then something pulled at her, a memory she couldn't shake. Her mother's voice, soft and warm, singing to her when she was little. Before she could stop herself, Emily hummed a few notes of Waves of Grace, a lullaby her mom used to sing on the rare nights they'd sit together by the window in Portland. Her voice was shaky, untrained, but it spilled out anyway. "Waves of grace, carry me home through the storm. I'm not alone." Jacob's shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn around, but he didn't yell either. For a moment the room was still, the only sound the faint echo of her song mixing with the distant crash of the waves. Then so quiet she almost missed it, he murmured, "My mom used to sing that." His voice cracked just a little, and Emily's heart skipped. She didn't know what to say, didn't know if she should say anything. But for the first time since she'd arrived, Jacob didn't push her away. He just sat there, staring at the sea, lost in something she couldn't reach. That was yesterday. Now, as Emily sat on the creaky porch steps of Jacob's house, sketching the jagged cliffs in her notebook, she couldn't stop thinking about it. How had she ended up here, married to a stranger who hated her, in a town she'd never even visited before? To understand that, you'd have to go back to Portland, back to the house that smelled of roasted coffee and broken promises. Emily grew up in a big, drafty craftsman home on the outskirts of Portland, the kind with stained glass windows and a wraparound porch that nobody ever used. Her dad, Daniel Harper, ran Harper Logistics, a trucking company that hauled freight up and down the West Coast. They weren't billionaires, but they had money, enough for a fancy car in the driveway and a fridge that never ran empty. Enough that Emily should have had a good life, but she didn't. Her mom died when she was born, a complication the doctors couldn't fix. Emily only knew her through a handful of faded Polaroids and the stories she'd pieced together over the years. Daniel never talked about her, never even said her name, Laura. Instead, he remarried fast, bringing Linda into the house when Emily was 3. Linda was all sharp edges and sharper words, a woman who'd loved Daniel since high school but hated the shadow of his first wife. And then there was Sophia, Emily's half-sister, 2 years younger and the apple of Daniel's eye. Emily wasn't abused, not in the way people might picture. No bruises, no locked doors. But she was invisible. Daniel barely looked at her, his eyes always sliding past her to Sophia, his real daughter. Linda made sure Emily knew her place, scrubbing dishes, sweeping floors, folding laundry, even though they had a maid. "You're just like your mother," Linda would snap, her voice dripping venom, always expecting someone else to pick up the slack. Emily didn't know what that meant, but she learned to keep her head down. Sophia, though? Sophia got everything. Last month, for her 19th birthday, Daniel pulled up in a shiny red Jeep Wrangler, grinning as Sophia squealed and threw her arms around him. "Anything for my princess," he said, ruffling her blonde curls. Emily watched from the kitchen window, her hands still wet from washing dishes. She'd asked for a sketchbook that week, nothing fancy, just a $10 one from the art store downtown. Daniel didn't even answer. He just walked away. That night, Emily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, sketching waves she'd never seen up close. The pencil scratched against the paper, the only sound in a house that felt like a stranger's. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying years ago. But her stomach twisted when she heard Sophia laughing downstairs, showing off her new keys to her friends. Emily pressed the pencil harder, the lead snapping under her fingers. The next morning, things got worse. Emily was on her knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor with a rag that smelled like bleach, her back aching from hours of work Linda had piled on. The maid, Mrs. Sarah, a gray-haired woman who'd been with the family since Emily was a baby, lingered by the counter, her brown eyes soft with pity. When Linda stepped out to take a call, Sarah slipped over and pressed a peanut butter sandwich into Emily's hands. "Eat quick, honey," Sarah whispered, glancing at the door, "before she comes back." Emily's throat tightened. "Thanks, Mrs. Sarah," she mumbled, taking a bite. The bread was soft, the peanut butter sticking to the roof of her mouth, a small kindness that felt like a lifeline. She looked up, hesitating. Did you know my mom?" Sarah's face softened. "Oh, sweetie." Laura was the gentlest soul I ever met. She'd sit right there, she nodded at the window seat, and draw the trees outside. "You've got her hands." Emily blinked back tears, shoving the rest of the sandwich in her mouth before Linda's heels clicked back into the room. "What's this?" Linda barked, eyeing the rag on the floor. "Daydreaming again? Get back to work." Sarah scurried off, and Emily bent over the tiles, her chest heavy with something she couldn't name. But that was nothing compared to what came next. A week later, Daniel called Emily into his office, a dark, wood-paneled room that smelled of cigars and old paper. He sat behind his desk, his face drawn tight, like he hadn't slept in days. "The company's in trouble," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Lost a big contract. We're bleeding money." Emily nodded, unsure why he was telling her this. She never got involved in his business. Then he dropped the bomb. "I met with James Carter yesterday. Owns Carter Lumber up in Astoria. He's willing to bail us out, but there's a catch. He wants one of my daughters to marry his son, Jacob." Her stomach dropped. "Sophia?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Daniel said, his voice flat. "You." Emily's breath caught. "Me? Dad, I don't even know him. What if he's... Why me?" "Because Sophia's my daughter," he snapped, finally looking at her. You're just here. This is your chance to do something useful. James says Jacob's a good kid. Just had a rough go after a car accident. You'll marry him, or you're out of this house. Your choice." "Dad, please," Emily pleaded, her voice shaking. "I don't want this. I don't even know him." "You don't get it, do you?" Daniel stood towering over her. "I've kept a roof over your head for 21 years. This is how you pay me back. Pack your stuff. You're leaving tomorrow." Linda and Sophia were waiting outside the door, smirking like they'd won something. "About time you did something for this family," Linda said, her lips curling. Sophia giggled. "Yeah, good luck with that guy. Heard he's a cripple now." Emily didn't sleep that night. She packed her sketchbook, a few clothes, and the pencil stubs she'd saved up for. The next morning, Daniel drove her to Astoria in silence, dropping her off at Jacob's house, a weathered cabin perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. "Don't screw this up," he said, then peeled away, leaving her standing there with her bag and a sinking heart. Now here she was, sketching on the porch, the wind tugging at her dark hair. Jacob was inside, still a mystery, still a wall she couldn't climb. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if she could survive this. But as the waves roared below, she traced their curves on the page, whispering to herself, "I'm still here." Hey folks! Emily's story is just kicking off. Will she find a way to break through Jacob's walls, or is this the start of something even darker? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think happens next. The Astoria wind howled louder these days, rattling the windows of Jacob Miller's seaside cabin like it was trying to break in. Emily Harper had been there 2 weeks now, and the place still felt like a stranger's house, cold, quiet, and heavy with shadows. She'd taken to waking up early, padding barefoot across the creaky hardwood to make breakfast. Not because Jacob asked, God knows he barely spoke to her, but because it gave her something to do, something to keep her hands busy while her mind spun. This morning she stood over the stove, flipping pancakes that sizzled in a cast-iron skillet. The smell of butter and syrup filled the air, mixing with the faint tang of salt from the ocean outside. She glanced over her shoulder at Jacob, who sat by the window in his wheelchair, staring at the gray waves like they owed him answers. His guitar still sat in the corner where she'd found it, untouched since that first day she dared to hum a tune. "Pancakes are ready," she said softly, setting a plate on the table. "I made extra if you're hungry." Jacob didn't look at her. "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice flat. "You don't have to keep doing this." "Doing what?" Emily asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Pretending you care," he said, finally turning his head just enough to meet her eyes. "I don't need your pity, Emily. I don't need you playing house." Her chest tightened, but she forced a small smile. "It's not pity, it's just pancakes. You don't have to eat them." She slid into a chair across from him, picking at her own plate. She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him she wasn't here by choice either, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she let the silence settle, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the distant crash of the tide. Jacob wasn't always like this. At least, that's what she'd pieced together from the bits and pieces she'd found around the house. There was a framed photo on the mantel. Jacob, maybe 22, standing on a makeshift stage at some coastal festival, grinning wide with a guitar slung over his shoulder. His hair was shorter then, his eyes bright with a fire she couldn't imagine in him now. Next to him was a woman with warm brown skin and a smile that lit up the frame. His mom, she guessed. The accident had taken more than his legs. It had snuffed out that light. 3 years ago, a drunk driver had plowed into Jacob's truck on Highway 101 just outside Astoria. He'd been coming home from a gig, still buzzing from the crowd's cheers. The crash left him paralyzed from the waist down, his dreams of music shattered along with his spine. His fiancée, Claire, stuck around for a while, 6 months maybe, before she bailed. "I can't do this," she'd told him, packing her bags while he sat there, helpless. Emily didn't know the details. Jacob didn't talk and she didn't ask. But she could feel the weight of it in every bitter word he threw her way. She tried, though. God, she tried. She'd tell him little stories while she cleaned, about the sketches she used to draw in Portland, about the time she snuck into a coffee roastery just to smell the beans. He'd grunt or nod, but that was it. Until yesterday when she'd found the guitar again. She'd been dusting the bookshelf, humming Waves of Grace under her breath when her hand brushed the strings. The sound was faint, mournful, and before she knew it, she was singing, really singing, her voice rising over the hum of the wind. "Waves of grace, carry me home." She stopped when she saw Jacob watching her, his jaw tight, but his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Don't stop," he said, so quiet she almost missed it. She hesitated, then kept going, her voice trembling but steady. When she finished, he didn't say anything, just nodded once like he was giving her permission to exist. And then, in a voice rough with disuse, he hummed the last few bars, the melody weaving between them like a fragile thread. That was the moment, the first crack in the wall between them. Today, as she watched him push his untouched pancakes around the plate, she wondered if it meant anything at all. But life in Astoria wasn't just about Jacob. The house had its own rules, its own voices. The two maids, Carla and Jen, whispered behind her back whenever she walked by. She's just here for the Carter money, Carla said one afternoon, loud enough for Emily to hear as she swept the porch. Look at her, acting all sweet. Gold digger, plain and simple. Jen snickered and Emily's face burned. She wanted to scream that she didn't ask for this, that she'd trade every dime of James Carter's fortune to be free, but she just kept sweeping, the broom scraping against the wood like a heartbeat. It got worse that afternoon. Emily was in the living room trying to sketch the view of the cliffs when Jacob rolled in, his face darker than usual. "Why are you still here?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Can't you see I don't want you around? I didn't ask for this marriage. I didn't ask for you." She dropped her pencil, her hands shaking. "I didn't ask for it either," she said, her voice breaking. "You think I wanted to leave everything I knew to come here and be your what? Your punching bag? I'm trying, Jacob. I don't know what else to do." "Then stop trying," he shot back, wheeling closer. "Stop acting like I'm some broken thing you need to fix. Go back to your room and leave me alone." Emily stood, her sketchbook falling to the floor with a thud. "Fine," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. She ran out the back door, the cold air hitting her like a slap as she stumbled down the path to the beach. The sand was damp under her sneakers, the waves roaring louder than her thoughts. She sank to her knees, the saltwater spray mixing with the tears she couldn't hold back anymore. "Why am I here?" she sobbed, her voice lost to the wind. She thought about running, grabbing her bag and hitchhiking back to Portland, but where would she go? Daniel had made it clear. She was on her own if she didn't play along. She stayed there until the sky turned bruised purple, her jeans soaked and her hands numb. When she finally dragged herself back to the house, the lights were off, and Jacob was nowhere in sight. She collapsed on her bed, a lumpy twin mattress in a room that smelled of cedar and dust, her mind racing. She couldn't keep doing this. She wouldn't. The next morning, she was in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal she didn't plan to eat, when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Linda and Sophia standing there, all fake smiles and designer coats. "Emily," Sophia chirped, stepping inside like she owned the place. "We've missed you so much." Emily's stomach twisted. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight. Linda brushed past her, eyeing the house like she was appraising it. "We just wanted to check on you, sweetie, and, well, your dad's in a bind. The company's tanking, and we thought maybe you could talk to Jacob's father. You know, since you're family now." Emily stared at them, disbelief turning to anger. "You drove 3 hours to ask me for money?" "Not money," Sophia said quickly, twirling a strand of hair. "Just help. I mean, I told Dad I'd say sorry for all that stuff before. I was a jerk, okay? But we're desperate." Before Emily could respond, Jacob rolled into the room, his eyes narrowing. "What's this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "They're leaving," Emily said, crossing her arms. Linda smirked. "Oh, come on, Jacob, you're loaded. Can't you spare a little for your wife's family?" Jacob's jaw clenched. "I know your game," he said, wheeling closer. "You think I'm some ATM you can sweet talk? Get out, now!" Sophia huffed, but Linda grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the door. "Ungrateful little—" Linda started, but Jacob cut her off. "Out!" he barked, and they scurried away, the door slamming behind them. Emily stood there, her heart pounding, unsure if she should thank him or run again. Jacob didn't look at her. He wheeled over to the corner, pausing by the guitar. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Then, with a grunt, he pushed it forward an inch, leaving it uncovered, like an invitation he didn't know how to voice. Emily watched him roll away, her breath steadying. "I'm not giving up," she whispered to herself, picking up her spoon. "Not yet." Hey, everyone! Things are heating up. Will Emily and Jacob find common ground? Or is this just the start of more trouble? Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment with your predictions. I can't wait to see what you think. The Astoria nights were growing colder now, the kind of chill that seeped through the cabin's wooden walls and settled into your bones. Emily Harper stood on the back porch, her breath fogging in the dim glow of a lantern, sketching the moon's reflection on the restless Pacific. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet, since Jacob had started spending more time in his room, away from her. She didn't know if it was progress or just another wall going up, but something had shifted since that day with the guitar. It had been a month since Linda and Sophia's visit, a month since Jacob had sent them packing with a fire in his voice she hadn't heard before. He didn't talk about it after, just rolled back to his spot by the window like nothing happened. But Emily noticed little things. The way he'd leave the guitar uncovered. The way he'd linger at the table when she set out breakfast, even if he didn't eat, if he didn't. She kept trying, kept filling the silence with small offerings, pancakes, stories, the occasional sketch she'd leave on the counter. Most days he ignored her. Some days he didn't. Tonight, though, she wasn't thinking about Jacob. She was thinking about home, or what used to be home. Portland felt like a lifetime ago, a blur of coffee-scented air and cold shoulders. She flipped through her sketchbook, her pencil tracing the cliffs outside, when a loose page slipped out, a yellowed sheet that didn't belong to her. Curious, she picked it up, squinting at the faded handwriting under the lantern's light. March 12th, 2005, it began. Jacob played his first song today, Ocean's Call. He's only 10, but his fingers move like they were born for that guitar. I hope he never loses that light. I hope he finds someone who brings him the sea when I'm gone. The signature at the bottom read, Grace Miller. Emily's heart stuttered. Grace, Jacob's mom. This was her journal tucked away in some forgotten corner of the house. She reread the words, her fingers brushing the ink. Grace had loved the sea, loved music, just like her. And that line, someone who brings him the sea, hit her like a wave. She'd been drawing the ocean since she got here, leaving sketches of waves and cliffs scattered around like breadcrumbs. Was this a coincidence or something more? She didn't have time to decide. A soft knock startled her, and she turned to see Jacob in the doorway, his wheelchair framed against the warm light inside. Emily, he said, his voice quieter than usual. You okay out here? I heard something. Her eyes widened. He'd never checked on her before. Oh, yeah, I'm fine, she said, tucking the journal page into her sketchbook. Just drop this. Did I wake you? No, he said, rolling closer. I was up. Couldn't sleep. He paused, his gaze flickering to her sketchbook. What's that? She hesitated, then handed him the page. I found it in the bookshelf. I think it's your mom's. Jacob took it, his hand steady but his breath catching as he read. For a long moment he didn't speak, his eyes tracing the words like they were a map to somewhere he'd lost. She wrote this, he said finally, his voice rough. I remember that day she sat there clapping like I just played Carnegie Hall. He let out a small, broken laugh, the first she'd ever heard from him. Emily sat beside him on the porch step, the cold wood biting through her jeans. She sounds amazing, she said softly. My mom loved music too. She'd sing to me. Waves of Grace, mostly. It's the only thing I really have left of her. Jacob looked at her then, really looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. That's why you sang it, he said, more to himself than to her. I don't know what I thought. It's okay, she said, her voice barely above the wind. I didn't know it meant something to you too. He nodded, handing the page back. She'd have liked you, he said, so quiet she almost missed it. Then he wheeled back inside, leaving her sitting there with her heart pounding and a tiny spark of hope flickering to life. The next morning, everything changed. Emily was in the kitchen pouring coffee when Jacob rolled in, his face serious. I've been watching you, he said, and she nearly dropped the mug. Watching me? She asked, turning to face him. Yeah, he said, his jaw tight. The way you keep going, cooking, drawing, all of it, even when I'm an ass, and the way Carla and Jen treat you. He paused, his voice dropping. I heard them yesterday talking crap about you again, called you a leech. Emily's cheeks flushed. I'm used to it, she mumbled, looking down at her coffee. You shouldn't be, he said. And there was an edge to his tone she hadn't heard before. He wheeled out, and 10 minutes later, she heard him in the living room, his voice raised. "Carla, Jen, get in here." She peeked around the corner as the two maids shuffled in, looking smug until Jacob started talking. "I've had it," he snapped. "Emily's my wife, not your punching bag. You don't respect her, you don't work here. You're done, both of you. Pack your stuff and go." Carla's jaw dropped. "You can't." "I can," Jacob cut her off, "and I am. Out." They stormed off, muttering, but Emily just stood there, her heart racing. He'd stood up for her, actually stood up for her. When he turned and saw her watching, he shrugged, almost sheepish. "Should have done it sooner," he said, then rolled away. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to thank him. But that night, when she brought him a plate of spaghetti, he didn't push it away. He even said, "Smells good," and took a bite. It wasn't much, but it felt like everything. The peace didn't last. 2 days later, Emily's phone buzzed, a rare call from Daniel. She answered, her stomach sinking as his voice crackled through. "Emily, I need you to talk to James Carter," he said. No hello, no how are you. "The company's gone under. Lost everything. You're my last shot." She gripped the phone, her knuckles white. "Dad, I can't." "You can," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You're married to his son. Tell him to throw me a lifeline, or we're on the street. Me, Linda, Sophia. You owe me this." "I don't owe you anything," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You sent me here like I was a bargaining chip. I'm done fixing your messes." "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You're nothing without me." The line went dead, and Emily sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. Jacob rolled in, catching the tail end of it. "Your dad?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Yeah," she said, wiping her eyes. "He's desperate, but I'm not going back." Jacob nodded, then hesitated. "I wasn't going to tell you this yet," he said. "But a doctor in Seattle called my dad. There's a surgery, experimental. They think it could get me walking again. High risk, though." Emily's breath caught. "Are you going to do it?" "I don't know," he admitted, looking away. "What if it fails? I've been down that road, hoping, then crashing. I can't—" He trailed off, his hands clenching the armrests of his chair. She slid closer, resting a hand on his. "You don't have to prove anything, Jacob. Not to me, not to anyone. But if you want to try, I'll be there, every step." He looked at her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Why?" he asked, almost a whisper. "Why do you keep sticking around?" "Because I see you," she said simply, "and I'm not leaving." The next morning, they were on a plane to Seattle, Jacob, Emily, and James, who'd insisted on coming. The hospital loomed ahead, all glass and steel, a place of hope and fear tangled together. In the prep room, Jacob grabbed her hand, his grip tight. "If I don't wake up," he said, his voice low, "keep that guitar. Play it for me." Emily squeezed back, her eyes burning. "You'll wake up," she said, forcing a smile, "and we'll play it together." The doors closed behind him, and she sat in the waiting room, sketching waves in her notebook to keep her hands from shaking. Hours stretched ahead, and all she could do was wait. "Hey, folks, we're at the edge of our seats now. Will Jacob pull through, or is this the breaking point for Emily? Smash that subscribe button and drop a comment with your guesses. I need to know what you're feeling." The Seattle hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, a sterile hum buzzing beneath the fluorescent lights. Emily Harper sat hunched over her sketchbook, her pencil scratching out jagged waves as the clock ticked past midnight. It had been 6 hours since Jacob Miller went into surgery. 6 hours of holding her breath, of whispering to herself, "He'll be okay." James Carter paced nearby, his polished shoes clicking against the tile, his usually calm face etched with worry. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. Finally, the surgeon emerged, pulling off his mask with a tired smile. "It went well," he said, and Emily's pencil clattered to the floor. "The nerves responded better than we hoped. With therapy, he'll walk again. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon." James let out a shaky laugh, clapping a hand on Emily's shoulder. You hear that, kid? He's gonna make it. She nodded, tears spilling over as she grabbed her sketchbook, clutching it like a lifeline. When they let her see Jacob, he was groggy, hooked up to machines, but his eyes found hers through the haze. Told you I'd wake up, he mumbled, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Yeah, she said, brushing his hand with hers. You did. Recovery wasn't easy. Back in Astoria, the weeks blurred into a rhythm of physical therapy, frustration, and small victories. Emily was there for all of it, holding Jacob's arm as he stood on wobbly legs, cheering when he took his first step with a walker. You're a drill sergeant, he'd grumble, but he'd grin when she handed him a glass of water after a session. She'd sketch him sometimes, capturing the sweat on his brow, the determination in his jaw. He'd roll his eyes, but never told her to stop. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the Pacific, they sat on the porch together, Jacob in his chair, Emily on the steps. He picked up the guitar for the first time since she'd arrived, his fingers clumsy but sure as he strummed a few chords of Ocean's Call. She hummed along, her voice weaving with his. And when they finished, he looked at her, his eyes soft. Thanks, he said simply, for sticking around. She smiled, her chest warm. Thanks for letting me. Life settled into something good, something real. Jacob started helping James with Carter lumber, crunching numbers from home while his legs got stronger. Emily turned the backyard into a garden, planting wildflowers and sketching them as they bloomed. They even started a project together, a small art center for Astoria's kids, a place where they could paint and play music for free. Your mom would have loved this, James said one day, watching them hang a sign that read Grace's Haven. Jacob nodded, squeezing Emily's hand. Yeah, she would have. But not everything was perfect. 8 months into their new life, Emily was rocking their newborn daughter Lily in a nursery painted with waves when Jacob sat her down after dinner. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice low. It's about your dad. Emily's stomach dropped. What about him? She asked, cradling Lily closer. Jacob sighed. He came to Dad a while back begging for help. Company's gone, bankrupt. Linda and Sophia took off with what was left of his cash. He's in a hospital in Portland now. High blood pressure, stress. I didn't tell you while you were pregnant, didn't want you worrying. She stared at him, a flood of emotions crashing through her. Anger, sadness, a flicker of pity. He's alone? She asked, her voice small. Yeah, Jacob said. Pretty much. She didn't say anything for a few days, just rocked Lily and thought about Daniel, the man who'd never hugged her, never called her his. She remembered the chores, the cold stares, the way he'd traded her like a pawn. But she also remembered the little girl who'd once drawn pictures for him, hoping he'd smile. She needed closure, she decided. Not for him, but for her. The next morning, she asked Jacob to drive her to Portland. He stayed in the car with Lily while she walked into the hospital, her hands trembling as she pushed open the door to Daniel's room. He looked smaller than she remembered, pale, thin, his gray hair plastered to his forehead. When he saw her, his eyes widened. Emily? He rasped, sitting up. Is that you? It's me, she said, stepping closer. Hi, Dad. His face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I was a terrible father. I know that now. I pushed you away, and I hate myself for it. Can you forgive me? She looked at him, this broken man who'd hurt her so much, and felt the weight of years pressing down. I wanted you to love me, she said quietly. I tried so hard, and you never saw me. But I'm okay now. I've got a family, a life. I forgive you, Dad, because I don't want to carry this anymore. He sobbed, reaching for her hand, but she didn't take it. Thank you, he choked out. Thank you, Emily. She nodded, paid his hospital bill at the desk, a final act of kindness, then walked out, the air feeling lighter with every step. Back in Astoria, she told Jacob everything over coffee, Lily napping in her crib. "You did the right thing," he said, pulling her close. "You're stronger than he'll ever know." Meanwhile, Daniel's world kept crumbling. After Emily left, he moved into a cramped apartment in Portland, the walls bare, the silence deafening. Linda and Sophia had vanished to California, chasing a fresh start with the money they'd taken. At first, they splurged, fancy dinners, new clothes, but it ran out fast. Now, Linda scrubbed floors in a diner, her nails chipped and her back aching, while Sophia washed dishes in a greasy spoon, her Jeep long repossessed. One night, flipping through channels on a thrift store TV, they froze. There was Emily on a local news segment, smiling beside Jacob as they cut the ribbon for Grace's Haven. "We want kids to have what we found," she said, her voice steady. "A place to heal." Linda's face twisted with shame. "She's got everything," she muttered, switching off the TV. Sophia just stared at the blank screen, silent for once. Daniel saw it too, from his hospital bed before he'd been discharged. He didn't call her, didn't dare. He'd lost his chance, and the regret ate at him like rust. His houses, his cars, his pride, all gone to pay debts he couldn't outrun. Alone in that tiny apartment, he'd sit by the window, staring at nothing, wishing he could turn back time. In Astoria, Emily and Jacob built something better. One evening, they stood on the bluff behind their cabin, Lily giggling as she toddled between them. Jacob leaned on a cane now, his steps slow but sure, strumming the guitar while Emily sketched the sunset, pink and gold bleeding into the sea. "We made it," he said, his voice warm. "Yeah," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We did." They weren't perfect. Life never was. There'd be hard days, fights, bills to pay. But they had each other, and Lily, and a little haven by the ocean where broken things could mend. Emily had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant letting go. And Jacob had learned that light could find you, even in the dark. As the waves crashed below, she traced one last sketch, a family, small but whole, and smiled. Hey everyone! That's the end of Emily and Jacob's journey. What a ride, right? Did their story hit you in the feels? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your favorite moment. I'd love to hear it. Stick around for more stories like this because there's plenty more where that came from. See you next time.